There's news in the NFL today, and it's time to break it down in the only way we know how. Hot Route style, with our spin on football headlines with a mix of frozen tundras, neck rolls, and grass-stained jersey.
Hello and welcome back to Hot Routes. I'm your host, as always, Paul Hodowanic, and with me today, Purple Insider's own Matthew Coller. Matt, how are we doing this evening?
I am good. Just sitting around waiting for the Super Bowl like everybody else. And I guess looking forward to the hype that comes along with the next few days leading up to the game.
Yeah, we're kind of in a weird spot where the Vikings have their head coach, but they can't really announce it. So we're just waiting for Sunday so they can officially announce it and we can kind of get rolling on all that means. But Hot Routes doesn't stop. We have plenty to talk about. Today, we're going to hit a couple Super Bowl questions. But first, we're going to start with some Vikings news. I know on the podcast last couple of days, you've covered the Adam Schefter report that the Vikings may be looking to keep Kirk Cousins and that Kevin O'Connell expressed a lot of confidence in Kirk Cousins and being able to work with him. So I'm a little skeptical on whether that is factual or if that's just a leverage play to hopefully get more from a trade. You don't want to say, yeah, we're done with him. Like that doesn't really help your leverage, but let's just assume for a moment that is true and they are going to extend Kirk Cousins. I think that changes the calculus of how they may go about the draft. Certainly would probably remove them if they extend him from taking a quarterback in the first round, at least you would think. So I want to know from you, what are the biggest, most likely positions you expect the Vikings to go or should go in the first round? So this is a little different than just needs overall, because maybe some of the needs don't have the value of a first round pick. So in your mind, with the first round pick, if they stick with Cousins, what are the positions that they should be looking for?
Yeah, the easy answer here is best/most valuable player available. So don't maybe take a center, even though there is supposed to be a center who is going to be drafted very highly this year. Don't take a left tackle when you already have a left tackle in Christian Darrisaw. But other than a couple of positions, I mean, you can make an argument for all sorts of different spots that the Vikings could draft, even ones that seem filled, like wide receiver. You can never have too much talent around your quarterback, right? But I think that by far the two positions that would be the leaders would be cornerback and edge rusher. We don't know as of right now Danielle Hunter's future and whether he'll be a Viking, but even if he is, on the other side, over the last couple of years, we've seen the Vikings really struggle to fill in these pass rusher positions. Last year, Everson Griffin, when he played, was very good. But after that, we saw DJ Wanham put together a handful of sacks. Overall, his statistics did not really point to somebody who is a long-term solution there at edge rusher. Pressuring the quarterback is something that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's past teams have done extremely well. Cleveland built up their defensive line. San Francisco, you know what their defensive line looks like. And I think that drafting those guys high is the answer. I know that's the answer to all positions, is if you draft them higher, they're better. But specifically edge rushers, if you want one of those franchise Bosa level type players, normally you've got to pick that guy at the top. There are very few Danielle Hunters in the world, as we have seen from the Vikings in recent years. And one of the benefits of drafting an edge rusher is if the guy clicks, you can have him for a long time, getting 10 sacks for you. Cornerbacks are a little more volatile, and I think we saw this in the Vikings drafting corners over the years. Trey Waynes had some rough times and then emerged as a pretty good player. You could say the same for Xavier Rhodes, where it took a few years for him to develop. And then Mike Hughes and Jeff Gladney, neither one of them worked out as first-round picks. But the Vikings, as we speak right now, basically have no one in the secondary outside of Harrison Smith. So they need to start rebuilding that as soon as possible. And rebuilding it through free agency is difficult. It's expensive. So, if you draft somebody young and they turn out to be the next Tre'Davious White or something like that, it can be incredibly valuable for you. I think those positions are far and away the top ones that will be targeted for the Vikings if Cousins is still around.
Yeah, I'm going to go a different way if Cousins is still around. And it's one you briefly mentioned, but I think they should go wide receiver again in the first round, whether that's Garrett Wilson from Ohio State, Drake London, USC, Jameson Williams, I think is Alabama. I think if they if they're going to keep riding this Kirk train, I think they would be smart to continue to invest in things that elevate him. And maybe, I mean, we're not going with tackle for either of these, and I don't think an interior offensive lineman, unless that Iowa center is there, maybe you consider that. Next spot, I think you go as wide receiver just to continue to bulk up your weapons. I think you like KJ Osborne as your number 3 wide receiver, and I think that's a solid place to be. But if you want to be truly elite, like if you are trying to copy what the Rams are doing, you need many, many pass catchers at your disposal. And when one goes down, you have another one you feel really, really confident in. And I think what it would also allow them to do potentially is feel better about moving on from Adam Thielen. And then you have more cap space that, getting rid of him would allow. You'd probably get maybe a second round pick that you can reinvest in this draft to go help the defense, to go help the interior line, because you're going to be shedding that cap space, which you'd presumably be bringing down Kirk Cousins's cap space if you're extending him, bringing him in again. So that helps you create some cap space as well. So either you can just go high flying with all those guys and let Kevin O'Connell and his 11 personnel just run wild, or you can decide we're going to take this chance, move on from Adam Thielen, kind of like we just did with Diggs and Justin Jefferson. Hey, that worked out pretty well. Let's try to do it again. Continue to give Kirk Cousins young weapons and see where you can go. So I think the obvious choices are probably along the defensive line, but I think it would be really fascinating to see them lean in completely to the offense like I know we had been talking about for the past several years and never truly happened. This would clearly signify that they are all in on that passing game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much on the side of more weapons. Even the Rams, and it didn't work out this year, but they drafted Tutu Atwell in the second round as well. And I think that that's a really good strategy, because we've seen what happens when one receiver goes down. And this has been Adam Thielen in 2 of the last 3 years, where when he's gotten hurt, that they really didn't have an answer for somebody to step up. KJ Osborne is more of a number 3 wide receiver. And even if he continues to develop and improves, he isn't somebody that you're necessarily as afraid of as Adam Thielen if you're the defense. So I think that having weapons, I mean, at any spot, like whether it's on defense or offense, you can never have too many defensive linemen. You can never have too many corners. Like that's just always the case. You need more talent. But this is something that the Vikings sort of left kind of sitting out there with maybe some points left out there that because they didn't invest more. I mean, D.D. Westbrook, Kendall Wright, like these were just not good decisions. Tajay Sharp, of players that they tried to fill in to fix those positions. And I think that that's something that the new general manager, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and Kevin O'Connell can focus on, that there needs to be more answers, because like every other position, receivers get hurt. They have hamstrings and ankles and whatever else happens. And if you don't have another answer, then teams can just focus entirely on Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about the Super Bowl. We've talked about this in recent weeks, just teams emulating what the Super Bowl teams do, even the AFC, NFC championship teams will do. So I want to know from you, what would be the most misguided, but like still plausible? Like these can't be, well, just draft Joe Burrow number 1, but what would be the most like misguided team building takeaways that teams could make from these two teams? Because inevitably people are going to make mistakes based on what's happened in the last couple of weeks. So what ones do you foresee teams making, or which ones would you avoid?
Yeah, the two that come to mind for me is number 1, trading a bunch of draft assets for players in their 30s, like Von Miller. Yeah. I don't know that that's usually a good strategy. Falling in love with a quarterback because his last team wasn't all that good. Like, I don't know that that's a good strategy either. The Lions are a very unique situation with how bad and inept they were in recent years, that the jump from Matt Patricia to Sean McVay might as well be going from, gosh, I don't even know. I mean, that's like the 31st ranked coach to the 5th or 4th or whatever, wherever you want to put McVay, top 5 for sure. I mean, that is a massive jump. And trading for Von Miller was an all-in move that, hey, if they blow it against Tampa Bay, or if they blow it against San Francisco where they're down in the 4th quarter, then this whole thing is a failure and you have given up a ton of assets. I think that teams will start to look at this and say, well, maybe we could trade those first round picks. And I don't know that that's actually a good idea, because it really narrows your window into basically a year or two where you have to succeed. Also, the Rams have lucked out in hitting on middle and later round picks like Cooper Kupp as a 3rd round pick. We saw what happened when the Vikings tried to rely on that after hitting on Kendricks, Diggs, and Danielle Hunter in the same draft. And history does not always repeat itself when it comes to middle and late round draft picks. So that's one. The other one I would say is, just because Joe Burrow has been able to work with this horrendous offensive line in Cincinnati with their pass protection doesn't mean that you can ignore the offensive line and just throw a bunch of guys together. I think Joe Burrow is pretty special when it comes to his pocket presence. Also, he does take a fair amount of sacks that may end up holding them back against the Rams in the Super Bowl. I would say that investing on the offensive line still is a very smart thing to do, even if Joe Burrow was able to work around it.
Yeah, truly, I think teams should not really emulate anything the Rams have done. Not that it hasn't been sound in their practices, but I fear too many teams, the Vikings could be one included, are just going to go all in on a maybe okay quarterback and say, well, the Rams did it. We just need to add a bunch of talent. But the fact that they hit on the guys like Von Miller, Odell, even Eric Weddle in just like the last couple of weeks, like signing him, like these bargain guys that you get, older guys that teams might not necessarily want or just don't value super highly, like it doesn't work out like this most times. Like most times they have a little bit of an impact, but not much. And so I think a lot of teams might look at the Rams and say, we could potentially do something like this, but they just have generational talent on both sides of the ball that just is not easy to come by. And a coach that is one of the best young coaches we've ever seen. Like nothing about the Rams feels sustainable long-term to me, or something that you can build upon, like something that other teams can draw from. Like I really think this is a unique strategy, which I credit the Rams for taking advantage of, but I don't see many scenarios at all where this works for any other teams.
Right. And it came very close to not working for them. I mean, they had a good regular season. They won 12 games, but it's not like they won 15 and just blew the doors off of everybody. And they were close to losing in both playoff games. And if you do that, then you have really mortgaged your future. And then what? And then what's your response? And also, like you said, I mean, Jalen Ramsey kind of landed in their lap because he wanted out of Jacksonville. Like these situations are hard to come by. Seattle has done a lot of the same things and their roster fell apart. They traded draft picks for Jamal Adams. It blew up in their face. And so when it doesn't work, we kind of just move on and say, well, that team wasn't good. Oh, well. And then when it does, you see, oh, that's what you want to do is go all in. But there are many more examples of teams trying to go all in and having it not work. And also, if the Rams hadn't built over a number of years to be at this point, then you could say, okay, for the Vikings, maybe it's a 1-year thing and they just go all in. But there isn't much to go all in around, as we were talking about with that draft discussion, that the Rams were very poor for a couple of years and built up this draft capital and drafted a lot of players. And some of them have played major roles, including Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp. Like those are two, that's maybe the best receiver in the league and one of the best defensive players of all time. Like that's all you need is just to land on those guys. That's hard to do. Usually you have to build a complete roster. And I think that they have overall. And then they were ready to make the trade for Stafford and get Von Miller and so forth. Also, Odell Beckham doesn't just show up every day in the middle of a season wanting to play for you. So, I think it's a very rare situation. And if you're trying to take this and apply it to other teams, we're going to see a lot of teams make some serious mistakes.
All right, I've got a couple funny questions for you here. But first, I just want to get your official on-the-record Super Bowl pick. We've talked about it a little bit the past couple weeks, but I want you to firmly make a decision here.
I'm going to go with the Rams 24-14. I think that Los Angeles just has the most complete roster. And even if there are some mistakes thrown in there by Matt Stafford, that offensive line of Cincinnati cannot hold up against the defensive line of the Los Angeles Rams. I think it's going to kind of look a lot like when the Vikings played the Rams, where, there were some opportunities to score there, and there will be for Cincinnati, but that defensive line of the Rams is just ridiculous. And I think there's only so much kind of running around and making plays that a quarterback can do until you run into a complete defense that is well coached and has all sorts of talent. So I'm going to go with Los Angeles. How about you?
I picked the Bengals when we first did our show right after the conference championships. I've waffled since then, but I'm going to stick with my original pick. Not for a lot of like factual reasons per se, but I don't want to now go against my pick and then watch Joe Burrow pregame come in with some outrageous outfit, have to root against him, and then when he wins, like be like, well, of course, Joe Burrow won. Like this was kind of his like coronation into the NFL. So that was my gut right after the first games. I'm going to stick with it here because I think I think I heard this point from Kevin Clark of The Ringer. I think we look back a lot of years, and when you look back on the matchup, it's pretty clear why a certain team won, or it like makes a lot of sense. Like, oh, that year they won, and it like last year, oh, like of course the offensive line, defensive line matchup, which I guess I'm going against this year. But I just think in 5 years, we might just look back and be like, okay, that was like the start of the Joe Burrow like era, like where he really, really took off. And so I can just envision that in my head. And frankly, I just want to root for it. So that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to just pray that Aaron Donald doesn't maybe Aaron Donald like woke up on the wrong side of the bed or something, or like, I don't know what happened to him in LA, but something happened and they're just not as sharp. But that's where I'm going to go with my pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Joe Burrow and the way he's playing and the weapons that he has, it's always possible that he could throw a couple of quick slants to Jamar Chase. They just go for touchdowns,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the thing about trying to break down one game and trying to guess one game is there's so many different factors. And what we saw in the playoffs is there are bounces that can go one way or the other. The Rams probably shouldn't have been playing in this game. I mean, Stafford throws this bomb that lands right in the hands of a 49ers defender and he drops it. And so a lot of times that's how it's going to end up going. But I think that the Rams are the better team, but Burrow is the better quarterback. So, I mean, maybe we'll end up with a classic.
All right. Well, now I need to know, we're going to do something a little different here. I want to know what Super Bowl you could win, and not in football, but just in life. If there was a Super Bowl for every random daily occurrence, task, activity, skill, what could you win? I gave you some examples. Like Rick Spielman would win the post-firing media tour Super Bowl. I think like Jeff Garcia would win the absolutely like bravado football guy take Super Bowl. Like, what random obscure Super Bowl would you win if everything in life had a Super Bowl?
Well, a couple come to mind. My dog is a greyhound, and she is a former race dog, and she won races when she was racing. And not that I approve of racing dogs, but we rescued her from there, and she was incredibly fast. Like some of these races are on the internet, and I don't know if she would still, at 9 years old, win the Super Bowl of greyhound racing, but if there was a Super Bowl of local dogs, she would blast past every single one of them. There's essentially a racetrack in my backyard with her morning run around the backyard, and she's still incredibly fast. So there's that. I would also say drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. If there's a Diet Dr. Pepper Super Bowl for who would have drank the most in a single week, that's probably me.
Okay.
I don't know if there's many more. I think I probably have the best beat reporter jump shot out there, but aside from that, I'm not sure I can win too many other Super Bowls. How about you?
Yeah, I don't think I have many Super Bowl wins. My only one, and this is an embarrassing fact to share about me, but when I was younger, I found I had this very random talent for like, you know how you can like make a cluck noise with your tongue, like I can do it very, very, very loud. And I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to blow out the speakers for our watchers or listeners, however you're consuming this. But it's not a fact that I was borderline considering not sharing that with everyone because it's embarrassing, but that would be my Super Bowl. So if you ever see me, just ask and I will proudly cluck for you. But that would be my Super Bowl here.
Everybody has their weird stuff. There are people who are double jointed who could do very crazy things like Kenny Pickett. Look, I have a regular thumb. See, it just goes straight. Kenny Pickett's is all crazy, push that way. Everybody has their freakish stuff, and that's a good way to look at it, Paul.
Yes.
Don't consider yourself a weirdo. Consider yourself the Super Bowl winner of doing something strange with a noise you can make.
Fantastic. Well, finally, our last is just on the Olympics. I've been watching a little bit of the Olympics. But I just want to know, Vikings players, if we're putting them in the Olympics, who has the best shot of making it, medaling, and what winter sport would they be doing?
The one that comes to mind, since Herschel Walker did this, would be Dalvin Cook and bobsledding, because you're talking about strength, explosiveness, quickness. And I think if you're a really strong and fast running back, as Herschel Walker proved, and I'm not kidding, like he actually did this. He actually did bobsledding, that you can push that thing and jump in. I could see Justin Jefferson being an incredibly explosive snowboarder. He seems like somebody that might like snowboarding. And as they go over and do these big, crazy jumps, you're talking about creativity, balance, the ability to land on your feet. I think Justin Jefferson would be pretty good at that if he never has before. And gosh, I mean, beyond that, I don't know. I want to make some offensive lineman figure skating joke or something. If they have great footwork, it would really be something to see Christian Darrisaw out there on ice skates. But there are some players who would make really good hockey players. I think CJ Ham, if he knows how to skate, would be a really good hockey player. Fourth liner, physical, tough, gets dirty in the corners and that sort of thing. A real grinder in front of the net. Maybe he would be good for hockey, but I imagine you, because you asked this question, came up with a couple.
I see Justin Jefferson like in doing speed skating, like going around. I can visualize him in one of those like helmets, those like weird aerodynamic helmets, like with the sunglasses on or whatever glasses they wear, just like really form like right around the rink, like long limbs, just like long strides coming out of Justin Jefferson, being really efficient with it. Just that was the like one that jumped to mind for me. And then I think like we could get some people doing like the curling, but like the shuffling part of it. I think that maybe you could find some offensive line like really pushing it down, getting the ice to fit where they need to go for something like that. And then I just like visually want to see Danielle Hunter do the like crazy ski jump thing, just because he has an insane vertical. So if he's like really generating some force coming off the jump to really get some aerodynamic stuff going on, I think he's probably a little too big for that. And I would be worried about him falling from that, especially with some injury issues that he's had. But I think that would be at least very, very fun. Very, very fun to watch.
I think those are all pretty good selections. I mean, I think the curling and the offensive lineman might be the best fit because they have to work side to side, shuffling with their pass blocking, and also probably wouldn't mind just pushing a rock down some ice.
No, that sounds like a great offensive lineman afternoon for them. Great activity. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We are patiently awaiting the Super Bowl, and then we will be coming back after that to do some hot routes about the new coach and everything that matters the rest of this offseason. So thank you for joining me in this little bit of a lull, and we will catch you next week on Hot Routes.
Thanks, Paul.